Hi, so yeah, as you can see, I'm looking extremely beautiful today because it's Halloween, and yeah, so I let my sister do my makeup and we just went out trick-or-treating. Anyway, that's not what this video is about. So, I said in my past video, I think in my video yesterday, I think I said it, I can't remember. I had like an admissions test today for one of the universities, so it's like the Oxford admissions test for philosophy, and it was difficult to say the least. At least the first part of it was difficult. So there's part A and part B. Part A, there was questions on logic or argument. I think it was definitely a mixture of them both, and those two are almost synonymous in some ways because you have to use logic in order to formulate an argument. Anyway, there was a piece of text talking about the properties of things. So, for example, something can either have the property of whiteness or not have the property of whiteness. It lacks whiteness, and not having whiteness is the same as lacking whiteness. And I was like, okay, that sort of makes sense. And it was all really confusing. And then it started talking about properties in a different sort of sense. So, for example, the number 7 lacking braveness does not imply that number 7 is a coward, because that attribution or that property is just not applicable to the number 7, because the number 7 doesn't have the characteristics in order to be able to fit into the category of being of having the property of braveness, because it's not conscious, it can't make decisions, it can't act in the world, therefore it can't be brave or be a coward. So just because it's not brave doesn't mean that it is a coward. And that was the sort of question. And then there was 2 questions after that little piece of text. And the first question was, it said something like, explain in your own words the thought process above, or something like that. And I didn't understand what it wanted me to do. So I did blag on a bit at first. And I don't think I did very well on this question, to be honest, because I just don't think I did it concisely enough. And I'm not sure if my answer was actually relevant to what it was asking, but it did take me a long time to actually get my head around what it actually wanted me to do. I could understand the piece of text, like it was like, yeah, that makes sense, but I ended up going on a bit of I don't want to say rant because it wasn't, but it might have been a little bit about well, how it's sort of trivial to say that something like a wall, for example, lacks the property of whiteness or has the property of whiteness. There's no point in pointing that out, but then you can sort of take that thinking a little bit further and say, well, maybe with a wall it's not so important, but the fact that we as human beings are able to identify the characteristics or properties of a certain thing actually increased our chances of survival, because our ability to distinguish between let's say a wild berry lacking whiteness or having whiteness, or lacking redness or having redness, could be the difference between eating a poisoned berry and a non-poisoned berry. And obviously there's more to it than just the characteristic or property of the colour, because it does go further than that. There's also the shape of the berry or the size of the berry, and we have to take all that into consideration in order to be able to derive an actually meaningful conclusion. So I did go down those sorts of lines a little bit as well, but I think that was besides the point. I think I probably did lose focus of the question, but I feel like I demonstrated my ability to think philosophically, but I don't know if I did it relevantly or not. And anyway, so that was part A. That was the first question in part A. There was another question in part A as well, which I had to answer both. So the second one was about the number 7 lacking braveness. So there was the argument about number 7, and it was saying how, well, one of the arguments was saying that it lacks the property of braveness, but that doesn't make 7 a coward. And then it went on to say some other things that I can't quite remember. And then there was another argument posed in the second question, which was saying that that this statement is false. 7 is a coward, 7 is brave. Or it said these statements are false. 7 is a coward, 7 is brave. Yet these statements still have meaning because we're able to attribute a truth value to them, and that truth value is essentially false. So if we're able to determinately say that something is true or false, then we're able to say that that statement is actually meaningful. And I didn't actually write about this in the question, but I wrote about it in my little planning section. And I wish I wrote about it in the question because I feel like it would have been extremely relevant. However, I'm not so sure because the question was which argument is more valid, which one should we believe, or should we go with, and it was basically the verification principle. It's probably quite funny watching me talk about this with makeup on my face, but anyway, I'm having a good time. That's what matters. Anyway, so the first so the verification principle, which talks about meaning, and it sort of made me. I didn't know which category to put it in exactly because I wasn't sure because well, is it empirically verifiable? I guess it is actually. It's a synthetic statement that 7 is brave because we can go out into the world and we can test it. So sure about that, but I didn't. Oh, okay, that's fine. So 7 is brave. Is a meaningful statement. I mean 7. Yeah, because these statements are false. 7 is brave. 7 is a coward. So 7 is brave is a false statement, okay, which is true, which is a true statement about the false statement. And we know that by going out into the world and testing whether or not 7 is brave. But then again, can you really test if 7 is brave? Well, you can look at the number 7 and you can observe 7's behaviour and see whether it's brave. But then again, what if we're talking about people? Because what if... I could have wrote about this. Like 7 just being a representation of certain objects or agents within the world. And the number 7 could be 7 people. It could be 7 dogs. It could be 7 pens. And if it's 7 people, then the 7 people would be brave. And I could have wrote about that, but then also clarified that it doesn't actually specify exactly what there is 7 of, or if it's just the concept of the number 7, like the form of 7, and to use Platonic terms. So that was the first part anyway, and I ended up arguing that that the first argument was better about 7 not being brave, and because 7 lacks braveness, that doesn't mean that 7 is a coward, and then just went on to say how it's contingent on the human experience in order to be brave or not be brave. Like 7 doesn't fit into that category, therefore we shouldn't attribute those sorts of labels to the number 7. It's just meaningless almost. And the second part, part B. So there's like I think there's a list of 3 questions, I believe, 3 or 4 questions. I can't remember exactly, but you have to choose one and answer it. Now the first one I was going to do was about belief and knowledge. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along those lines. So I was like, oh, that looks interesting. That's sort of what I want to do. But then I read through the questions again, and I noticed that the second one was about ethics. I thought, well, okay, I did good at ethics at A-level, so why don't I write an ethical essay here? And the question was, and I don't know if I can actually quote this exactly, but it was is it always right? 1 minute, I'm talking. 1 minute, what? Okay, so is it always wrong to publicise the name of a suspected criminal, so like not actually convicted, and is it always right to publicise the name of a convicted criminal? And obviously, well, I started off by talking about deontology and absolutism, and saying, well, can we really apply an absolutist moral rule to either of these situations? Because it's almost like an extremely generalized category of convicted criminals and suspected criminals, because in each of those situations there is a different set of circumstances or a different set of state of affairs which would then determine as to whether it is right or wrong to release this person's name. For example, if we have good evidence which suggests that the criminal who is yet to be convicted did commit the crime, then perhaps it is right for us to release their name, because then it lets society know that we should probably stay away from this person. However, if we don't necessarily have good evidence, yet the media ends up publicising this person's name, and it turns out that they were actually innocent, in the meantime of them actually being convicted, they've already been convicted by society, and this is going to affect their social reputation. They're probably going to lose their job, and I also linked to the Me Too movement with this. And obviously, people were truthfully and honestly accused of sexual assault, but they were also people who were falsely accused, and they ended up losing their jobs and just yeah, it had a massive negative impact upon their lives. So yeah, I really enjoyed the second part of that of the admissions test, and the second part probably, I know that they're weighted equally, and I don't think I did as well in the first part, but the second part I'm pretty confident about, so I'll just have to wait and see one. Anyway, I'm about to watch a film with my little sister who is over there, and the person who kindly did my beautiful makeup.
Wait, why is some of my sweets gone?
I picked up a empty wrapper out of one of the boxes. I actually did. I don't eat those sorts of sweets. I ate oranges because I'm a vegan vampire.
Yeah, is it your orange? It's my orange.
That's your orange. I already ate mine.
Here you are.
Thank you.
Oh, nice.
Okay, I'm gonna go now. Thank you for watching.
And eat sweets.
Oh, and let me know if anyone else did the Oxford admissions test, because I'd be interested to hear your experience, especially if you did the philosophy one. Thank you for watching.